This is rough. I really need to clean up around here. Can't even find Greg anymore. The bulk of these don't even matter. I think we need to talk. And I know people tend not to like the whole let's leave physical behind and go all digital thing. That's not exactly what this is. Let me get that out of your head right now. But at some point, enough is enough, and we maybe need to reevaluate all the options we have on hand to see if there just might be a better way. Of course, from the perspective of an outsider to the industry. Before that, if you're into tabletop content and are new to the channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, maybe the like if you're interested. We also have a community Discord linked below. Swing on by, show off your projects, let us know how your games are going. Talk rules, theory craft lists, the community is growing and we'd be happy to have you. All that being said, let's think on rules books going forward for Games Workshop. There you are! So, 10th edition for 40k dropped with a massive moment. Day 1, all rules will be free. Core rules, initial index rules for every army, combat patrols, legacy, imperial armor. This all announced shortly after D&D attempted to single-handedly decimate its community by demanding tribute from them before rolling that horrendous decision back. A pretty big mic drop moment. In tiny text, however, hidden among the initial news posts over on the Warhammer community page, the general statement claimed that the rules would be free until the codices were released. This was verified as the Tyranid and Space Marines rules dropped. We were back in the realm of needing a physical book to receive the digital goods. Thankfully, they kept the free index out to allow new players a chance to check in on... Scratch that. Free indexes are gone as well. Hopefully, among the consistent issue of supply chain, everyone that built up their teams managed to get their hands on any of the books released. And to all those waiting for their own to drop, good luck and Godspeed. At least with the books, stock seems to be alright. It's not like back in 9th when no one could find a Warzone Nephilim book. I wasn't fully around for it, and even I felt the sting of wondering if I would need to claw and scrape my way towards getting the bare basics of what I needed to play. But the Pandora's box was opened here, and the positives that came from this were massive for the community. Returning to Big Hammer, I knew I was going to focus on the Dusty Thousand Suns, but this gave me the chance to check out other factions and see just what I could pick up for some extra flavor. Chaos Knights, Demons. Initially I took these as allies and have since moved the Knights up to a full list with the Demons close behind. And now my latest list, the Gene Stealer cults. I always wanted to check them out, but I never really wanted to buy any rules, especially if I ended up deciding against playing them. I was always worried that maybe the less durable teams weren't for me, having been so firmly stuck in the realm of the Chaos Space Marines for so long. I gotta say, after rolling my first dynamite attack, I'm hooked. Doesn't matter that I rolled pretty bad on the hazardous check. I also fell in love with the idea of looking up my possible opponent's armies. Whatever light level of OCD I have tends to demand that I fully prepare for all possibilities when wading into a competitive space. Even at a casual level, I'll sweat when I want to. Among my local friends, we have Eldar, Custodes, Sisters, Black Templar, Death Guard, and possibly more eventually. Access to their indexes allows me to understand every level of what I might expect getting into while fighting them, or at least a small taste. This also prepares me for the notorious gray rules in most of Games Workshop systems, to preemptively establish how certain interactions will most likely go. But now, we've had several books dropped, fully negating my understanding of the teams outside of reading condensed articles that might miss details I want and then simply assuming a playstyle. We're moving back to the old ways, and I'm not fully on board with the decision, although I can see from some angles the reason for it. But there was a sort of nerd magic that came from talking to random people in my local stores about the game and pointing out how easy it is to learn and to find the army they want simply by going through the app or checking the Warcom download page. And that is eroding now. We're slipping back into unknown variables and having to buy in just to decide whether or not we want to continue down a chosen path. And look, I know the direction 40k has been going these past couple rules arcs tend to be a point of contention with a lot of people. I'm also on YouTube, I see it. But I feel like 10th focused its goal on bringing a more casual audience in, while still trying to appease a competitive level player to a degree. lack of points variations is a whole other topic. But I feel like the Codex approach breaks this new focus, but also doesn't really help push the competitive player's agenda all that much more. Follow me for a second. So with Games Workshop leaning more heavily into decently advertised big video game titles alongside the upcoming deals with streaming services for potential shows and maybe movies, we'll have to see how all that pans out. You'd think they would maybe lean towards ensuring an easier pathway to taking part in as many elements of their games as possible, cross-promotion and all. And with 10th's launch, they kinda did it. It was actually really surprising. Among my gaming group that had just become acclimated with the kill team system, seeing this pivot was jaw-dropping. In my opinion, they achieved a sort of golden standard to allow people an easy step to beginning their plastic addiction. The trick was whether or not they got the next step right. It could secure the potential for a surge of interest going forward, and set the baseline for Games Workshop to stand apart from so many other companies that come and go. My hope at the time, well, in my ideal world, a codex would still be a thing, and maybe the digital code would still serve as a permanent unlock on the digital side of the game. The app, or whatever form it takes, maybe something with a bit more focus on pre-orders that comes in waves of reprints over time. But for those who dislike clutter, or maybe arrive too late to the scene and find their only option is learning a foreign language and buying the rules off of eBay from that country, or even live somewhere that is limited in what they can order or get access to, there needs to be a better way for them. On top of this, keeping the starter level avenue open for new players to begin the grander collection would probably be a good idea. Maybe. And yes, I know Combat Patrol is a thing. I've played it. It's fun. It is also one of the least adaptable concepts in the game, with many balancing issues right now. Even though the speed and oddity of it was enjoyable, until the Thousand Suns get their hands on a new list, I most likely will be focusing on the larger format. And this is an issue for the new player experience. It gives unrealistic expectations. Watching most of my team get mulched to simple attacks while the biggest unit I have access to underperforms and even dies easily to teams with tank shock as an option, which the Thousand Suns don't come with. Having already played, this did not deter me. As a new player, I probably wouldn't even consider continuing, but maybe that person would still like the idea of magical space golems. What if there was something that just, I don't know, existed with more information and team options to maybe give a clearer picture on what to expect? Oh look, an index with the larger rules and unit options. Oh man, these Cabal functions would work so much better, and the damage output here. At this point, Combat Patrol would give them the basic understanding of game flow, turns, stratagems, rolling the massively addictive dice, and seeing the weaknesses and strengths of that list could have given them some thoughts on what their collection should focus on as well as avoid. Maybe a little less chaff, a little more damage output and sustain, and without spending any money on a risky venture, they'd still be moving on to the next level of play. Full-on games of 40k. The end game. Now, I'm not saying a full codex on release should just be free online, no. But I feel that leaving the free index list out there for anyone to pick up could serve as a gateway for new players wanting to expand into the more paid portion of the rules, finding out that they have access to some of the things they went up against, or at least a version of it, that could give them some fun ideas. And this is where I think the big thing Games Workshop seems to want would come into play. If you don't want the books, and don't have a friend willing to part with a code, Warhammer Plus. You know, the subscription service. Monthly fee? There are so many of those these days. Day and date full codex updates to the app if subscribed, or maybe slightly after. This would even allow for veteran players who are hyper-focused on one army and make it to the conceptual end of their collecting to, I don't know, maybe make some bad late-night decisions and try out something new? Build a random 2K list for that Xenos team and hit purchase? And pray the Emperor isn't watching. Sounds pretty awesome, right? And for some people who are single-minded in their gaming, they still have the option to simply grab a code and be alright without needing to go all in, if they're not that worried about checking in on the enemies. Or maybe they pay the subscription as well for their one team, as well as the list building options and anything else we hopefully get. That's just consistent income at that point. But this is utopian in concept. If you haven't quite had this life lesson, those tend to crumble under the weight of greater humanity. Eventually, there may be a way to abuse these benefits, it's a whole thing. Other side of the coin time. I think much of the fear Games Workshop has for this more free-flowing function of their rules has to do with some level of, I guess, piracy, or at least ease of piracy. It's no secret that there are websites and other methods of getting access to the full and current rules of Games Workshop games. Hell, there are gray markets that exist now due to some decisions that were made about producing their models in the past backfiring, to what I understand. Apps and digital files are great and all, but they can also be very easy to copy and disseminate, which makes the digital approach scary to companies in this situation. But at the same time, we're already kinda there. It's all a bit messy. So what seems to be happening is that these books serve another purpose beyond the obvious. From what I've seen, most official level tournaments demand that every player must have a physical codex on hand to even play. It doesn't matter if you're using the cards or app for reference primarily. It's sort of a way to lock the competitive scene behind an initial purchase of a book that serves as a pseudo player ticket beyond the venue cost. Past the odd piracy problem, there's another maybe less apparent fear: losing storefronts. Have you been to a local game store that carries Games Workshop products among other game systems? That wall always feels monolithic in comparison to anything else they have. How happy do you think the non-Warhammer branded stores would feel finding out all these books they ordered might go unpurchased, as it's just easier to use a subscription service or other digital means? My local store has accumulated boxes of unpurchased rulebooks dating back to 6th edition for 40k alone, and I believe those predate the easier access for rules and books. There is a mild correlation here with some news coming out of the video game scene. Some companies pushing hard to get people to join their subscription services are being dropped from some stores in places like Europe. Very much the same thing could happen here, at which point the growing Games Workshop brand in 40k could suddenly halt, possibly even fall off completely. However, I'm not so sure about this. At the end of the day, the game is still mostly played with models that Games Workshop explicitly puts out. I doubt the GW wall would shrink all that much in this situation, and some stores might be happy to simply direct the customers to the Games Workshop site to see the free rules, maybe potentially full game examples to entice them with minimal need for the employees to know about the whole minutia of the game. But I feel like the bigger problem might be the models themselves, or at least the structure of needing more things. Maybe that's the core of it. Let's say I've been collecting for my faction of choice since 5th and never stopped. Every new model dropped, maybe I gathered 3 full-sized units, maybe more. As more editions drop, I keep the focus on them. Whole rules arcs might go by at a time without need for me to purchase anything new outside of that consistent codex update. This isn't like the insanity that is trading card games. Endless reboots and new prints and runs that need to be purchased in order to keep up with rule sets and current event play. Short of some vehicles and the never-in-stock Mutalith Vortex Beast, my Thousand Suns are done. Full Terminators with options, full rubrics, all sorcerers of all varieties. My wallet was almost off of life support until I decided to pick up a new faction. If that was it, I don't know if giving me free rules going forward is going to help much with growing the brand. Then again, a $60 purchase probably won't change much either. I feel like we're at a moment in time that is like ripping off a band-aid. On one hand, they could go the utopian route. Very easy and effective access to rules on the cheap with options for the more lore-centric players and collectors to get physical books. Many of the online sites and apps that compile such things to provide to players for free anyway might find themselves becoming obsolete shortly after. More new players will find a better runway to go from 0 to 60 on their end for collecting, as well as an easier way of getting people in their niche communities to think of hopping in. Sure, they potentially lose some shelf space, but I feel like in the long run the books don't hold the same value as the models anyway. From my own recent experience, I ended up buying an Achilles Ridge Runner from an older edition box before they changed to the new box art. That model is still very much up to date. The codex from them, not so much. It's just a longer shelf life value, and that all feels better from a storefront perspective. Sure, old heads might run out of things to collect at times, but maybe the easy to access free rules might break their spirits and force them to make bad choices. And if the app does end up being good enough, that's basically a permanent purchase. On the other hand, the course returns to business as usual. I feel like new player interest will slow heavily as Games Workshop rebuilds the wall around itself, maybe trying to lean into a little bit of FOMO to get people to spend money, maybe driven by the new exterior uses of the 40k IP. But as a fellow nerd, I recognize that at times we as a community tend to build that wall up ourselves. I know I keep catching myself doing that sometimes. I don't know if Games Workshop reinforcing it will serve as a good thing. When competitive communities move towards the casual, it can be worrying, especially for those who bought in expecting to maintain the Excel spreadsheet-driven ecosystem of old. Some of us remember. Inherently, though, increasing player base means more new people needing to slowly work their way towards becoming the old head collectors. More income for Games Workshop, which maybe, as I'm pretty sure many of us are hoping, helps them to overcome the current supply chain issue they have been consistently having. Which also means new faces, new people for us to play, and if there is anything us nerds truly love, it's being nerds with other nerds. But please, nerd responsibly. With all these thoughts and ramblings out there, what do you think? It's been a little bit of time since 10th was released, and we as a community have been given a more clear picture on how it will progress going forward. Do you feel that the return to the Codex requirement is a good path? Do you feel the simplicity of combat patrol is enough to carry the weight of the new player experience going forward? Let us know in the comments below, or even continue the conversation over on our community Discord. It's been exciting to see that community grow this past year, and I'm looking forward to seeing where it goes from here. As always, likes for the like god and subscribes for the subscribe throne. I am Kimmerix, and I'll see you in the next one.